My name is Anna Lewis, and this story begins on the night my life fell apart in a way I never imagined. I had known my husband, David, for 10 years. I had loved him for most of them. And I had forgiven him more times than my heart had room for. But nothing prepared me for the moment he looked at me with a face I could barely recognize and said words that still echo inside me. "You're a tramp, Anna. And your kid will be too." It didn't sound real at first. His mouth moved, his voice filled the room, but my mind refused to accept that those words were meant for me, or for our little boy, Ethan, who stood at my side holding onto my hand with his tiny fingers. I remember the way Ethan looked up at me, confused and scared. His brown eyes trembled, the same eyes he inherited from his father. He didn't understand what was happening. How could he? He was only 4. He only knew love, hugs, bedtime stories, and the soft blanket he slept with every night. But in that moment, he learned fear. David pointed toward the door with a shaking hand. "Get out. Now. Both of you." And that was it. The end of our home. The end of the life I thought we had. The end of the woman I used to be. I didn't fight back. I didn't shout. I didn't even cry. Something inside me went still, the way a lake freezes overnight when winter arrives suddenly. I picked up a small bag, one that barely held anything. A few clothes for Ethan. His stuffed elephant. My wallet. Nothing else. When I stepped outside, the sky opened and rain poured down. Heavy, cold, merciless. My thin shirt clung to my skin, and Ethan shivered against my shoulder. I wrapped my body around him, trying to shield him from the rain, though I could barely shield myself. Behind us, I heard the door slam. The sound felt final, like a book snapping shut before the last chapter is written. As I walked down the street, water splashing around my shoes, Ethan whispered, "Mommy, where are we going?" "I don't know, sweetheart," I said softly. "But I promise you, we'll be okay." My voice trembled, but the promise was real. Because in that moment, I realized something quietly, painfully, beautifully true. David might have thrown us out. But the world had not. And 1 year later, after the cold nights, the long days, the fear, the rebuilding, the healing, life proved him wrong in ways I could have never imagined. But this was the night everything changed. The night a door slammed behind me. And another kind of door began to open inside me. Before the night David pushed us out into the rain, our life looked simple and ordinary from the outside. If someone had asked me 2 years earlier, I would have said we were a happy family, quiet, maybe a little tired, but happy. I think that's the strange thing about life. Sometimes everything looks fine until the day it doesn't. Sometimes a storm has been building for so long that you no longer notice the clouds until lightning finally strikes. David and I met in our early 20s. I was working part-time at a small bookstore, arranging shelves and helping customers find the novels or cookbooks they wanted. He walked in one afternoon, asking for a biography he couldn't remember the title of. I helped him find it, and he returned the next day, and the day after that. I used to laugh at the memory, because later he admitted he had finished the book quickly but pretended he hadn't so he had a reason to see me again. He was gentle back then. Quiet in a thoughtful way. He listened more than he spoke, and when he smiled, it reached his eyes. He brought me coffee during my breaks, walked me home after my shifts, and asked about my dreams for the future. I liked that about him. I liked feeling seen. Loved. Chosen. We married 2 years later, in a small ceremony behind my mother's house. Nothing fancy, just flowers from a local shop, a rented tent, and a cake decorated with uneven swirls of frosting. My mother cried through the entire ceremony, whispering blessings into her tissue. I wore a simple dress, and David looked at me the way a man looks at the one thing he never wants to lose. And for a while, we were good. Our first apartment was tiny, with beige walls and a kitchen barely big enough for 2 people. But it felt warm. We cooked cheap meals together: pasta, chicken, rice. We spent evenings watching movies, wrapped in blankets, dreaming about owning a home one day. David talked about better jobs, promotions, a future where he could provide everything we needed. When Ethan was born, everything shifted. Becoming parents changes people, even when they don't realize it. Holding my baby boy for the first time felt like holding the entire world in my arms. His tiny fingers, the soft rise and fall of his chest. I fell in love instantly. David cried when he held him too. I thought we were entering the happiest chapter of our lives. But parenthood also brought pressure. David started working longer hours. Sometimes he came home late, exhausted and withdrawn. I would be sitting on the couch with Ethan asleep on my chest, waiting for David to walk through the door, hoping he would smile or sit next to me. But often he would head straight to the shower or to bed, barely speaking. At first, I told myself he was stressed. New fatherhood, tight finances, big responsibilities, of course he was tired. I tried to be understanding. I tried to make home a comforting place. I cooked his favorite meals, kept Ethan quiet when David looked overwhelmed, took on as much of the household as I could. But the space between us began to widen. Small things turned into silent moments. Silent moments turned into quiet hurts. Quiet hurts turned into something heavy that neither of us talked about. Sometimes David came home smelling faintly of perfume I didn't wear. Sometimes he said he was working late, but his paycheck didn't reflect overtime. Once, I found a receipt for 2 dinners at a restaurant we had never visited together. I held the paper in my hand for a long time, my heart pounding, but I didn't ask him about it. Not because I didn't want the truth, because I was afraid of it. I had a child to protect. A home to keep stable. A marriage I wasn't ready to lose. The distance kept growing, and I kept shrinking to fill the gaps. There were moments when he seemed irritated by everything I did. If I asked him about his day, he snapped. If I forgot to pay a bill on time, he sighed loudly and muttered something under his breath. If Ethan spilled his juice or cried a little too long, David's jaw tightened in frustration. I learned to move quietly through the house. I learned to speak softly. I learned to swallow my own feelings so his didn't get worse. But inside, I was slowly breaking. I spent many nights sitting by Ethan's crib, watching him sleep, listening to his gentle breaths. Sometimes I would cry quietly, wiping my tears before they fell onto his blanket. I didn't want to wake him. He deserved peace. He deserved a mother who was strong, even if she felt weak inside. The day everything truly started unraveling was a simple afternoon. Ethan had been drawing on a piece of paper, his crayons scattered across the table. David came home early, something unusual enough to make me pause. His expression looked tense, suspicious. He held a stack of mail in his hand. One envelope lay open. A credit card bill with charges I didn't recognize. When he asked, "Care to explain this?" I froze. I didn't make the charges. I didn't even know the card existed. But as I looked at David, something told me the truth wouldn't matter. He had already made up his mind. That moment was the beginning of the storm that would eventually throw Ethan and me out of our home. But back then, I still hoped things could be repaired. Back then, I still believed David's anger would fade. Back then, I still believed love could fix anything. I just didn't know how wrong I was. The afternoon David came home early with that credit card bill was the moment I realized how far we had drifted, not just as husband and wife, but as 2 people living under the same roof with completely different truths. He dropped the envelope onto the table like it weighed more than paper should. "What is this, Anna?" he demanded. I picked it up slowly. My hands trembled as I scanned the charges: expensive dinners, hotel stays, clothing stores I had never stepped into. My stomach tightened. I don't recognize any of these, I whispered. He crossed his arms, his jaw tight. Of course you don't. His tone cut deeper than the words. It carried something bitter, something already decided. David, I swear I didn't open this card. He leaned closer, eyes sharp. Then who did? Ethan. He let out a humorless laugh. I stepped back, instinctively shielding my son who was sitting quietly on the floor, coloring. I felt his eyes on us, confused, afraid. I lowered my voice. Please, not in front of him. David glanced at Ethan but didn't soften. I'm serious, Anna. I work all day while you stay home, and you still find a way to waste money. The accusation struck hard. I'm not wasting anything, I whispered. I barely spend. He cut me off. Are you seeing someone? My heart dropped. I stared at him, stunned. My mind scrambled to make sense of his words. What? No. Why would you even? Because you sure as hell aren't spending your time on me, he muttered, turning away. His words stung not because they were true, but because they revealed something I had tried so hard not to admit. David didn't see me anymore. Not the woman who made dinner. Not the woman who rocked our son to sleep. Not the woman who waited for him every night with hope she couldn't name. He only saw whatever story he had built in his head. I swallowed my tears. Please, David. I haven't done anything. He said nothing. He just grabbed his keys and walked out, letting the door slam behind him. The next few days felt heavy, like moving underwater. David barely spoke to me. His silence was a cold wall I kept walking into. When he did speak, it was clipped, impatient, sharp around the edges. He criticized everything I did. If Ethan spilled milk. This is what happens when you let him run wild. If the laundry wasn't folded. Do you do anything all day? If dinner wasn't to his taste. I'm tired of coming home to this crap. It didn't matter how carefully I tiptoed through the house. It didn't matter how quietly I breathed. It didn't matter how gentle I tried to be. His anger lived in him now, constant, simmering, always waiting to boil over. Sometimes I wondered if he even saw me anymore, or if he only saw the resentments he carried. One night, after Ethan fell asleep, I sat on the edge of our bed and asked softly, David, can we please talk? He didn't look at me. What is there to talk about? Us. Things don't feel right. I know you're stressed. I know something's wrong. But I'm not your enemy. He sighed, rubbing his forehead. You just don't get it, Anna. Then help me understand. He finally turned toward me, but his eyes were tired, distant. I can't carry all of this, he said. The bills, the house, the pressure, everything. And you don't help. You just take. I blinked, stunned. I take. David, I'm raising our son. I'm doing everything I can. He shook his head. I'm the one working. I'm the one paying. And what do I get? Complaints. A messy house. Cold dinners. His voice was growing louder. I put my hand out gently. Please. Lower your voice. Ethan's sleeping. His expression hardened. Of course. It's always about him, isn't it? You care more about that kid than you care about me. That kid? I whispered. He's your son. Silence. A deep, terrible silence. Then David turned away again. I'm done talking. And he pulled the blankets over his shoulder, leaving me sitting on the edge of the bed, feeling like someone had drained all the light from the room. The days turned into weeks. The tension in the house grew heavier. Ethan felt it too. He stopped running freely around the living room. He clung to my leg more often. His laugh, once bright and wild, became quieter. One morning, as I tied his shoes, he asked in a small voice, "Mommy, Daddy mad?" I forced a smile. "No, sweetheart. Daddy's just tired." He looked at me with eyes too wise for his age. "You sad too?" A tear slipped down my cheek before I could stop it. I wiped it quickly and kissed his forehead. "Mommy's okay." But I wasn't. Every day I felt more like a shadow living in a house that once felt like home. Then something shifted again, something darker. David began coming home late. Sometimes he didn't come home at all. He started guarding his phone. Leaving the room to take calls. Hiding receipts. Ignoring my questions. I didn't have proof he was seeing someone. But in my heart, I already knew. One night, he came home smelling of perfume again, different from the first time. More floral. Stronger. He washed his clothes before bed, something he never did before. I sat on the couch after he went to sleep, staring at the wall. "What happened to us?" I whispered to the empty room. But no answer came. The breaking point came on a rainy afternoon, the kind where the sky looks bruised and heavy. David came home early again, his expression tight and angry. He threw another envelope on the table. "This is the last straw," he said. I opened the envelope. It wasn't a bill this time. It was a letter from the bank, an overdraft notice. "I told you," he snapped. "I told you to stop spending. I told you things were tight." "I didn't spend anything," I said softly. "I swear, David." He shook his head, pacing. "You're lying. You're always lying. David, please. Just shut up," he shouted. Ethan flinched from across the room. He ran into my arms, burying his face in my shirt. And then David pointed toward the door. "Get out," he growled. "Get out of my house. Now. I'm done with you. Both of you." His voice wasn't just angry. It was final. This wasn't the moment he insulted us. This wasn't the moment in the rain. This was the moment right before that final explosion. The moment the storm truly broke. And I didn't know then. That everything he was accusing me of was exactly what he had been doing. I didn't know then. That the lies weren't mine. The spending wasn't mine. The betrayal wasn't mine. I didn't know the truth. Not yet. But it was coming. And when it arrived, it would destroy the man he pretended to be. And free the woman I was meant to become. The day everything finally broke open felt unreal from beginning to end. Even now, when I think back to it, I remember pieces more as sensations than moments, shaking hands, heavy air, a dread that pressed against my skin like cold rain. After David shouted for us to get out, I thought he would calm down. I thought he would lower his voice. I thought he would realize how fragile the moment was, how frightened Ethan looked, how deeply his words cut. But he didn't. Something in him had already crossed a line he could no longer step back from. Ethan clung to my leg, tiny fingers curled tightly around my pants. His little voice trembled as he whispered, "Mommy, what's happening?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. My throat felt like it was closing. David stepped closer, his face twisted with a kind of frustration I hadn't seen before. "I said get out, Anna. I'm not repeating myself." My heart raced. "David, please, let's talk about this." "There's nothing to talk about," he snapped. "I'm done with your lies. I'm done with you draining me. I'm done with everything." I swallowed hard. "I haven't lied." He laughed bitterly. "You think I don't know? You think I haven't seen you sneaking around? Dressing nicer. Staying out longer. Using money and pretending it wasn't you. My eyebrows knitted together in confusion. David, I haven't. Save it, he shouted, cutting me off. I know the truth. But he didn't, not the real truth. He thought he did because he needed someone to blame. Someone to carry the weight he didn't want to face. And in his mind, that someone was me. Ethan whimpered softly, and David turned his glare toward him for the briefest moment. That look alone made my protective instincts flare up like fire inside my chest. Don't look at him like that, I said quietly, stepping in front of Ethan. David scoffed. You've turned him against me too. Nothing in this house works anymore because of you, Anna. His words hit like blows. Sharp. Heavy. Unfair. But something in me, something small but brave, finally cracked open. David, I said softly, you're not talking about me. You're talking about yourself. He stiffened. For a moment, only the rain outside filled the silence. Then he stepped closer, his voice low and dangerous. Get out. He didn't shout it this time. He didn't need to. The calmness made it worse. I looked at Ethan and saw fear in his big brown eyes. And in that instant, something became clear in a way it never had before. I had to protect my child. Even if it meant stepping into a future I wasn't ready for. Even if it meant leaving behind the life I had tried so hard to save. I took a deep breath. Okay, I whispered. We'll go. David didn't expect that. His expression flickered, confusion. Surprise? Regret? I couldn't tell. It passed so quickly I wondered if I imagined it. But he didn't say stop. He didn't say wait. He didn't say anything. I grabbed Ethan's coat, my small bag, and the documents in the drawer. My hands shook as I packed. My legs felt like they were moving through water, but somehow, I was moving. I opened the front door. That's when David hurled the final blow. You're a tramp, Anna. And your kid will be too. You're nothing without me. Nothing. I gasped. Not out of shock, but out of the sheer cruelty of it. Ethan jumped at the sound, burying his face into my shoulder, crying softly. I didn't turn around. If I had, I might have collapsed. I stepped outside. And the sky opened. Cold rain drenched us immediately, running down my back, soaking Ethan's hair, chilling my bones. I heard the door slam behind us, a sound that felt like a lifetime ending. I stood on the porch for a moment, frozen. My breath visible in the cold air. My heart beat loud in my ears. And then I walked. I didn't know where I was going, only that I needed to move. I needed to get Ethan somewhere safe. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere far from the voice that had just shattered the last pieces of my marriage. Ethan hugged my neck tightly. Mommy, he cried, why Daddy mad? I kissed his wet forehead. I don't know, sweetheart. But I'm here. I promise you, I'm here. We walked down the street, the rain soaking through our clothes. Cars passed by slowly, their headlights blurring in the downpour. No one stopped. No one knew what had just happened. Every step felt heavy. Every breath felt like it hurt. But somewhere inside me, a tiny spark began to grow. Small. Soft. Almost impossible to notice. It wasn't hope yet. Hope takes time. It was strength, quiet, trembling strength. Because even though I had been thrown out of the place I once called home, I hadn't lost everything. I still had Ethan. I still had myself. And I still had the ability to begin again. I didn't know then how life would unfold. I didn't know the long journey ahead. The heartbreak, the rebuilding, the small moments of joy that would slowly return. I didn't know that 1 year later, David would stand in front of me a changed man, broken by the very choices he once blamed on me. I didn't know that life would give me back more than I lost. But in that moment, in the pouring rain, with my child in my arms, I knew one thing for certain. This was not the end of my story. It was the turning point. Rachel's apartment became the first place in months where I felt air in my lungs again, not heavy, not sharp, just air. I didn't realize how much I had been holding my breath in that house with David until I finally exhaled on her sofa, my clothes still damp from the rain, Ethan curled up under a warm blanket. Rachel knelt beside me, her eyes soft and full of worry. "Anna," she whispered, "what happened? Tell me everything." And for the first time in years, I did. Not the softened version I used to tell people. Not the excuses I used to make for David. Not the hopeful lies I whispered to myself at night. I told her everything, every cold silence, every harsh word, every suspicion, every fear, every painful moment leading up to the day he threw us out. She didn't interrupt. She didn't judge. She didn't ask why I stayed. She simply held my hands, squeezing them gently as tears slid down my face. "You're safe now," she said softly. "You and Ethan are safe here." Safe. I hadn't felt that in a long time. That night, after Ethan fell asleep beside me on the couch, I sat awake in the dark living room, listening to his small breaths. I watched the rise and fall of his chest, the peaceful stillness of his little face, and something inside me softened. I realized that in saving him, I had saved myself too. The next morning, Rachel made breakfast, scrambled eggs, toast, warm oatmeal for Ethan. She loaned me clothes until mine dried. She even drove me to a community center where I could ask for help. I felt embarrassed at first. Ashamed. I was a woman who once had a husband, a home, stability. Now I was a mother with a small bag of belongings and no idea what came next. But the woman at the center, a counselor named Marilyn, spoke to me with kindness I didn't know I needed. "You're not alone," she said gently. "A lot of women start over. And you're doing it for the right reasons." She helped me fill out paperwork for temporary assistance. She helped me search for part-time jobs. She helped me enroll Ethan in a local daycare that offered sliding scale fees. She helped me take the first steps back toward myself. It wasn't easy. It wasn't fast. But it was possible. I found work at a small diner 2 weeks later, clearing tables and taking orders. It wasn't glamorous. I came home smelling like grease and coffee every night. My feet ached. My hands cracked from washing dishes. But I earned enough to buy groceries. Enough to buy Ethan a coat. Enough to pay for daycare. Enough to feel like I could breathe again. In the evenings, I walked to pick Ethan up. He always ran into my arms, shouting, "Mommy," with a laugh that healed places inside me I didn't know were wounded. We lived with Rachel for 3 months before I found a small apartment for us, just 1 bedroom, a living room, and a tiny kitchen. But when I held the keys in my hands, I felt something that had been missing for too long. Pride. Independence. A sense of being home, even if the space was small. I painted Ethan's corner of the bedroom light blue. I hung a drawing he made at daycare. I bought a small second-hand table where we could eat dinner together. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was walking on eggshells. I laughed more. I slept better. I sang to Ethan as we got ready in the mornings. And slowly, gently, I felt myself returning to life. As months passed, I heard nothing from David. Not a call. Not a message. Not even a question about Ethan. Part of me felt relieved. Another part felt deeply, quietly sad. Not for myself, but for Ethan. A child should not be forgotten. A child should not feel unwanted. But I didn't reach out to David. I didn't tell him where we were. I didn't ask for support. I needed space. Healing. Distance. Time. And Ethan needed stability, something David wasn't capable of giving at that time. Everything changed 1 year later. I had just finished my shift at the diner, wiping down menus, stacking chairs, when my manager, Mr. Harris, approached me. "Anna," he said, "there's someone outside asking for you." My stomach tightened. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I stepped outside, I froze. David stood near the entrance. But he didn't look like the man who threw us out into the rain. His clothes were wrinkled. His hair uncombed. His eyes tired, hollow, almost lost. When he saw me, he took a small step forward. "Anna," he said softly, I need to talk to you." I didn't move. I didn't speak. He swallowed hard, his voice trembling. "I'm so sorry. For everything." I stayed silent. He ran a hand through his messy hair. "Tina left," he whispered. "The woman I thought I wanted. She took my money. She emptied my account. She left without a word." I stared at him. "And now," he continued, "I'm alone. I have nothing. And I deserve it. I know I do." A faint breeze brushed past us. Cars drove by. Somewhere across the street, a dog barked. But all I could hear was my own heartbeat. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel angry. I felt separate. Detached. Like I was looking at a stranger, not the man I once planned a life with. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked softly. David looked like he was holding himself together with the thinnest thread. "Because I want to see you and Ethan," he whispered. "I want to fix things. I want to apologize. I want to. I don't know. I don't know what I want. I just know I messed up. I messed up everything." Tears gathered in his eyes. "I need help." I exhaled slowly. Once, those words would have pulled me in. Once, I would have tried to fix him. Once, I would have believed it was my job to save him. But I wasn't that woman anymore. "You need help," I agreed softly. "But I'm not the one who can give it to you." He stared at me, stunned. I continued, "You need to rebuild your life. But you won't do it through me. Not anymore." His shoulders sagged. "Can I at least see Ethan?" he whispered. I took a small step back. "You can go to court," I said gently. "You can request visitation. You can prove you've changed. But you won't see him without a process. Without protection. Without stability." He nodded slowly, tears falling. "Okay," he whispered. "I understand." And for the first time in a long time, I believed him. The day David walked away from the diner, shoulders slumped, tears drying on his cheeks, I felt something shift inside me. Not joy. Not revenge. Something quieter. Softer. A sense of closing a door I had waited far too long to close. A sense of stepping fully into a life that belonged only to me and my child. Over the next few weeks, David did what I asked. He filed for supervised visitation. The court required him to attend counseling sessions, financial management classes, and stability checks. I didn't ask the judge to punish him. I only asked for Ethan's emotional safety. And deep down, I hoped that maybe, by facing himself honestly, David could heal too. At our first supervised visit, Ethan hid behind my leg. David's face softened with a sadness I hadn't seen in years. "Hi, buddy," he whispered. Ethan didn't reply. He just watched, curious but cautious. I realized then that love does not vanish overnight. But trust does. And rebuilding it requires more than tears or apologies. It requires consistency, patience, time. David attended every required session. He came to every supervised visit. He arrived early. He stayed late. He asked how Ethan was doing in school. He asked how he could support from a distance. He never raised his voice again. And I slowly understood something I hadn't seen before. Sometimes people destroy their own lives before they realize how fragile they are. 1 year and 1 season later, I found myself in a park, sitting on a bench as Ethan played with a small red truck in the grass. The sunlight filtered through the leaves. The world felt soft, green, open. I thought about how far we had come. A year ago, my son and I were standing in the rain with nowhere to go. A year ago, I felt like my life had ended. A year ago, I carried fear like a second skin. And yet here we were. Safe, steady, warm. I had a job I enjoyed. I had a small apartment we called home. I had friends who felt like family. I had learned how to breathe without waiting for someone else's anger. I had learned how to sleep without fear of footsteps in the hallway. I had learned how to smile without forcing it. Ethan ran toward me, laughing, his cheeks flushed from play. "Mommy, look," he said, holding out a little flower he had picked. I took it gently and kissed the top of his head. "You're my whole world," I whispered. And he grinned, the wide, unclouded grin of a child who feels loved. As I held his small hand in mine, I realized something important. David was wrong. Not because life punished him, but because life showed me the truth. I wasn't nothing without him. I was more. So much more. And Ethan? He was not the insult his father once threw at him. He was bright. He was kind. He was pure possibility. My son would become whatever his heart led him to be. And I would walk beside him every step of the way. In the gentle warmth of that afternoon, I let the past go. Not with bitterness. Not with anger. Just quiet acceptance. Because sometimes the people who break you teach you how deeply you can grow. And sometimes the door that closes behind you leads to the life you were always meant to live. That is what 1 year taught me. That is what life proved. And that is why I no longer fear the rain.